Now that I've engaged with my breath and done the barely buzz exercise, it's time to make some noise in the horn and find the center. For my first note of the day, I prefer to play G4 on whatever trumpet I'm playing on. Before moving forward, let's first talk about what the center even means. My former teacher, Jim Thompson, first introduced this concept to me back at Eastman in the early 2000s, and he describes it so clearly in his book, The Buzzing Book. Jim says if the balance of airflow and lip tension is correct, the player will obtain a resonant tone rich in harmonics. This is what is known as being in the center of the tone. I'm also going to be using the word support throughout, so let's quickly define that also. Air support is giving the lips exactly the correct air for the task we're requiring of them, meaning the necessary quantity and speed of air. Often the word support gets conflated with more air, but that's not necessarily true. Rather than more air, let's pivot our thinking to correct air. Now back to centering. Using a visual analogy, imagine a dartboard. This dartboard is a single note, and let's stick with G. If you hit the dartboard, then you're successful to a degree. You didn't hit the wall or a friend. Hitting the dartboard is the equivalent of playing the right note, but as you know, each dartboard has a bullseye, and each note has its own center. This is where we want to be playing all of the time. The image you see here is an adaptation of a similar one in the Buzzing Book and helps to illustrate the relationship between our lip, our embouchure, and air that we're talking about. The opening in the center is the embouchure, including the aperture, while the two sets of arrows represent the opposing forces. The arrows pointing away from the embouchure represent the airflow causing the aperture to be pushed open, while the arrows pointing in represent the embouchure or lip tension that holds the embouchure steady. The majority of the time, imbalances are a result of too much lip tension due to an insufficient air support. But the opposite, excess support resulting in overworking the embouchure just to keep the whole mechanism held together, is also quite possible. Okay, so that's probably enough talking about it. Let's play around with this concept. In response, there are 3 separate centering exercises. The first one, centering exercise 1, is very simple but essential as we make playing in the center our norm. With a breath or air attack, I want you to play that G at a comfortable dynamic, bending above and below the pitch. What you're listening for is the sensation that the room you are in seems to be buzzing, vibrating with your full sound, and what you're feeling for is that of a balanced embouchure. Remember, a balanced embouchure is one where the air quality, which is the speed and quantity, is in perfect balance with the lip tension. It's very likely that when you hear the room buzz, you're playing balanced, as it's quite difficult to make that happen if it's not. But it's for sure easy to hear if you're playing in the center in a nice acoustic. As you get closer and closer to the center, reduce the pitch bends until they're no longer necessary and hang out on that perfectly balanced G. For centering exercise 2, I want you to recall the audible sound and the physical feeling when you arrived at the center in exercise 1. Once you have that in your mind, set your metronome to 60, and we're going to do a breath attack on that same middle G, but rather than bending up and down to find the sweet spot, I want you to isolate the sweet spot and start the note immediately with the sound that we found at the end of centering exercise 1. Finally, for centering exercise 3, we're going to set up as we did for exercise 2, but rather than starting with a breath attack, I want you to start the note with your tongue using a 2 articulation, starting the note immediately in the center. A quick note on articulation, I prefer to use the 2 syllable to discuss single tonguing and articulation. I prefer this as I think it keeps the back of my tongue relaxed and helps to facilitate clear articulation and immediate centering of my attacks. But as they say, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so whatever works for you is great. For more practice on attacking in the center across all registers, as well as refining our in-time hope breath that we discussed in the first chapter, turn to page 44 in the book, which is Attack Practice. You can also view the video dedicated to this exercise. See you over at the Flow Studies video.